FBI agents, what case will traumatize you for the rest of your life? A man reported that he heard screams from the walls as he passed by the place earlier in the afternoon. The man's complaint was the 26th noise complaint of a similar nature within the last month, and it finally led to the issue of a search warrant. This sounded like just a regular call, but I just never could have imagined the horrifying truth I would soon discover. I pulled up and parked my black Honda near the cobblestone pathway. The plains of Arizona surrounded me. The concourse led to a front triangle-shaped entrance. I approached a lower-ranked uniform. He stood behind a line of caution tape and had a scowl as I neared his vicinity. "Who are you?" he asked. "FBI agent Elizabeth Paulson," I said while I flashed him my credentials and the gold of my FBI badge. He stepped to the side. I walked in. The place was clean. I expected most crime scenes to have the repugnant stench of rotted flesh. The killer was tidy. The main foyer had trophies of deer heads hung on the mantel above the main elevator, which led to the second story. To my right, I saw a doorway with a set of steps past its threshold. These went down to a subterranean level. One of the homicide investigators looked at me. I approached her and extended a hand. She shook it and I introduced myself. She gave her title and name as lead investigator Samantha Brown. "Who is the subject?" "Eric Sigurdsson," Brown said as she handed me a photocopy of the man's ID. He was born in Cleveland but moved to the West Coast with his parents when he was 5. His childhood was not normal ever since his mother and father divorced. He did go on to do well in school, and was even accepted into the University of Berkeley before a DUI got him kicked out. The charges in that case were later dropped. Fear and intimidation towards the young victim was the reason. He only has 3 arrests on his record. One was for shoplifting a set of knives at a sporting goods store. The second was for stalking and harassment of a co-ed after his expulsion. The third was for the night he got behind the wheel after drinking. "How many bodies have you recovered?" I asked. "4, Brown said. "They were sunken." This surprised me. We found the entire floor of the basement is something resembling a thin quicksand. Its depths exceed that of 8 swimming pools. The viscous density will usually only allow you to sink to the halfway mark of your torso. "The movies lied to me," one of her subordinates said as he passed by with a clipboard clutched under his arm. "The artificial kind he constructed allows for full immersion," Brown said. "This is unlike the sort you would find along riverbanks or in marshes. We are still trying to find out if it's the thin density which drowns his victims. It liquefies upon contact with the heat of human skin, or it could be something poisonous within the makeshift sand itself. We have scientific researchers on their way here now to give us answers. All we know is the killer has a lifelong love of chemistry. Do the victims have commonalities? We have found 2 males and 2 females. He liked to target couples. Where is he? I need to speak to him. The boys are watching him in the greenhouse around back." I nodded and made my way to the rear entrance. I stepped outside and saw the glass and galvanized steel structure. When I peered into the humid conservatory, I saw rows of marijuana plants. 4 cops circled the detainee with guns drawn in the center of the house. I went inside and a boot landed on his jaw. While he was an evil man, he was also defenseless in handcuffs. He would not have been any use to me as an interview if a concussion made him unaware of his surroundings. "I won't report any of you to your watch commander if you back down now," I said as I showed them my badge. A few looked at me with disdain, then shock. Others gave me expressions of contempt. They all took a few steps back. "Give me us some time alone," I said. They looked at each other with unease before their corporal waved them out. The officer still stared at me through the glass once he stood by the exterior of the greenhouse. I approached Sigurdsson. He was thin and pale-skinned. He had a full head of brunette hair and blue eyes. He was 6 feet tall, and I could see why he had no problem passing for a normal person up to this point. "I've already helped you out," I said. "Eric, it's time for you to do the same for me. I need to know the reasoning for your choices in regards to who we found in your basement." He grunted and kept his head low. "Let me ask you a few things. I received an email during my drive here about the laboratory in your bedroom. The quicksand-like substance found in your murders intrigues me. I need to know where the choice of the unusual weapon came from. Why did you target an equal balance of men and women?" "I liked hunting couples," he said as he met my gaze. "My favorite thing to do was form the texture of the sand so they would sink slow. As they struggled to claw their way out, I would lie and tell them over a loudspeaker how they could survive. All they had to do was converse about a disagreement within their relationship." He cocked his head back and started to laugh. Tears streamed down his face. I knew something about this was deeply wrong. "The body language used when they argued made them sink deeper," he said with another cackle. "The kicker is how none of the couples ever failed to find something which nagged at them. These louts act as happy couples on social media while bickering behind closed doors. I put them in touch with who they are before they went under." "How did you kidnap these people and bring them here?" I asked. "It couldn't have been easy. Most killers go after women when they are alone." "That's right," he said with noticeable pride as his chest puffed out. "I never went strictly for the easy prey. I always wanted a challenge. I scouted out who the man of the house was and what he did for a living. If he seemed rough and tumble, that made it even better. Your wife Amanda is tough. I know about her background as a Kenpo instructor. You two would be prime selections for me." A wave of nausea overcame me. How did he know that? Sigurdsson rammed his forehead into my face. I felt my nose break as he struck his shoulder under my jaw and pushed me down. His strength overwhelmed me. A stream of red flowed onto my top. He stepped over me as the cops swarmed in. They entered with their pistols drawn. I looked over and saw Sigurdsson kick a box off the wall. It looked to be nothing more than an electrical junction. He raised his foot again and hit a switch. The floor unfolded and broke in half underneath us. The trap he had set consumed us. A gelatinous liquid flowed out from the sides and drenched us. It stank of old honey and algae. The officers started to slip as a few squeezed their triggers, but all missed Sigurdsson. The killer leapt onto a miniature platform which held the greenery. He ducked for cover behind a thick row of plants. I grabbed the platform in time before my entire body could sink. My knuckles turned white as I brought my other arm onto the platform and held on. The silt wanted to take me into its abyss. I looked over and watched the team of law enforcement in their last moments of life. They choked, screamed, and gargled as the fluid went into their lungs. A few circled in the morass, futile attempts to use their elbows to lunge upwards. One tried to hold his breath, a last desperate attempt to survive. The earthen and wet sediment mixture swallowed him. The corporal screamed and stared at the sky before his face became blanketed in the muddle. A gag was the last noise he ever made. I stared up and watched as Sigurdsson loomed over me on the platform. He lifted his boot and stomped on my fingers. A wave of adrenaline overcame me and helped mask the pain a little. I was still in agony and knew I could not afford to let go. Die already, he said as he brought his foot down again. I'll find your wife and make her look at her own dismembered body parts while I tell her what I did to you. He ground the bottom of his foot onto my fingers as though he was squashing an insect. He lifted his leg again to kick me in the face. I knew there was no holding on after that if he knocked me out. A gunshot rang in the air. Red blossomed on his chest as he fell back. The quicksand he had made took him in his pathetic entirety. I craned my neck around and saw Samantha Brown with a Glock in her hand. The sheriff's office helped me get out of the quagmire with the use of rope attached to one of their cars. They called the paramedics to take a look at me. I had a fractured hand, nose, and countless scratches on my skin. It would be a long recovery, but I owed the ability to pursue it to the detective who saved my life. She is still on administrative leave right now. As soon as she is able to receive calls at the station again, I will reach out to her to give a formal word of appreciation. Sigurdsson's attic held a plethora of documents, journals, and scrapbooks. He had personal information on plenty of people who were still alive. There were copious notes on those he intended to track down, torture, or kill. My lovely wife Amanda was in that pile. He had studied the Bureau and various other agencies he thought might be onto him. He attempted to dismantle them before they were on his trail. I am thankful we were faster. He also left behind maps. We found other quicksand locations using them as a reference. Bodies were in the Sonoran, the Great Basin, and the Chihuahuan Desert. His modus operandi was unlike any other I have seen, let alone heard of since. The problem with the unusual ones is they pave the way for copycats. Let us hope no one derives inspiration from him.